All right. Well, today we're, I don't know, week like 34. It's not that long, but we're like 5 or 6 or 7 into the series, What Would Jesus Do? And we're almost done with it. We just got a few weeks left. But man, it's been a lot of fun just looking at the stories and the life of Jesus, even the teachings of Jesus, and looking at those from a practical perspective, not just theological, but how does that affect our everyday life, and how does it affect our coming and our going and our relationships and different things. And last week we talked about understanding calling and purpose, and recognizing that every person has a calling and purpose, and that you're designed with one. And Jesus called that out of his disciples. In fact, when he was recruiting his disciples, he said, leave everything you've ever known or done before and come in, follow me. And so there's an invitation to follow Jesus and to be like Jesus, and that changed their calling and changed their trajectory of their life. The week before that, we talked about the fact that Jesus had a ministry to kids and for kids, and that we believe as a church that kids matter. And we looked at 7 different instances in the book of Matthew where Jesus actually stopped to minister to kids, to pray with kids, to heal kids, and the applications of that towards us in our church. We announced we're doing our first ever vacation Bible school this summer, and so come on, we're excited about that. If you haven't got signed up to help and serve, man, we still need you. We'd love to have you in a lot of different capacities. There'll be people here the weeks coming up to it, building props, setting stuff up, all that kind of stuff. And then there'll be people that week on those nights. And so if you're like, man, I work during the day, that's great. We're doing Vacation Bible School at night, a little bit different take. And so you could jump in, help lead small groups. You could help with snacks, all kinds of different things. We'd love to have your help because we believe that kids matter. They matter to Jesus. They matter to us in our church. We've talked about all kinds of different things. The art of withdrawal, the idea that we need to press pause sometimes. In fact, for us to say yes to the sacred, sometimes we're going to have to say no to the secular. There may be good things in our lives that are good. They're not bad, but we may have to say no so we can prioritize our walk with God. So we've had all kinds of different discussions, all kinds of different talks. In fact, next week, Pastor Ryan's bringing a message, going to be talking about community and the relationships that Jesus had in his life, and how we should look to have those same relationships in our own life. So it's going to be a great message. But this week, I'm going to talk about something that Jesus actually taught on quite a bit. He gave quite a few parables about it, quite a few direct teachings on this topic. And so it's going to be very easy for us to look at what Jesus has to say about it. But this week, honestly, man, I've been writing this message, but I've also been like preparing to go on a missions trip. And me and my 6-year-old son, Jaden, we're both going along with 13 total from our churches going to Peru to our church's first international missions trip. And we're excited about that. Yeah, come on, it's pretty awesome. And so you can imagine lots of little things, lots of little details, and you get the packing list, and, you know, do I have enough socks and underwear? Do I have, you know, the right bug spray? Because I don't want to come back with anything I didn't go there with, and so you go through all those different things. And one of those things for us, my wife was like, you need to upgrade your phone. Your phone's had a big crack in the screen. It's time for you to upgrade it. And I'd been due an upgrade, 3 or 4 years. And so I was like, okay, yeah, just let's do it. Get me a new phone, get me set up. I'm down for that. And so her question was, what phone do you want You know, there's all kinds of different phones. And I was like, I don't care, just pick one. And she was like, no, I mean, what phone do you work? And there's a reason she was asking me that question multiple times, is because there was a time in my life where I was very particular about which phone I got. There was a time in my life where I studied Apple. I loved everything that Apple was producing. And if Apple came out with a press conference and talked about their new phones coming out, or their new computers coming out, or new iPads, I would watch those things. Their State of the Union address for people who love Apple phones. And I would watch those things. I nerded out about them. I loved all the little cameras. This camera's 4K, and they did this, and they did that. I knew all about it. Something happened when I hit 40, and I don't know anything about anything anymore. There's something magical that's happened. I had to ask my kids for help now for different things that I used to lead in the house. Now my high school and middle school son are having to help me with. Something happened. I just don't care anymore. And so my wife was like, so which phone do you want? I said, just get me a black one. That's all I care about. The black iPhone. Don't give me no rose gold anything or blue or red. Just a black iPhone. So she does. She gets me an iPhone. And in that iPhone discussion, I realized the tension point was that there was something in my life that I used to care very much about. In fact, so much so that when a new phone would come out, I would find a way to, like, they call it jailbreak your phone, where I could sell it even though I was still under contract. I could sell it so I could afford to buy the new one because I had to have the new one because the new one was so much better. And in fact, this is the irony in that is, and maybe you've experienced this. Have you ever like saved up for something and like looked forward to something and then you buy it and you love it, and for like a day or two or a week or two, you're holding it, you carry it around like a baby, you know, you just like walk in, you set it down softly and you don't let other people touch it. But then all of a sudden, just it happens to me almost every time, within like 2 weeks of buying that thing that I've been waiting for, a new version gets announced. Did that ever happen to you? And they're like, hey, and guess what? That new car you bought that has the backup camera, the one that's releasing next month, I know you just bought yours last month, but that one has a 360 camera. And you're like, why? Can they not just put that on mine? It was just a month ago. Like, that technology's existed. You know, same thing with the phones. And sometimes it happens. We get to a place and we finally get something, but there's like, what else is there? Like, the next version comes out. The better version comes out. In fact, every Sunday afternoon, me and my wife struggle with this. We come home from church, often tired. Sometimes we eat, sometimes we don't eat. We take a nap. And the first thing almost every single Sunday that happens when I wake up from my nap, I open up Instagram to see what photos of the church got posted and if they got the right angle of me, you know. And so if you're taking photos, let me turn, you know. No, and like I just look at the photos of the church and like see what was happening. I was like, oh, that's so cool. Oh, that's what was happening over there. I didn't even see it. That's cool. Oh, yeah, I didn't see them today, but they're in a picture, so they were there, you know. And so like I come through those pictures. I'm on Instagram. And then within about 10 seconds of me looking for that, all of a sudden, every single Sunday, the Crumble ad for the next week pops up on my feed. And they're closed on Sundays, but it's important that they post on Sundays so that way you know what cookies they have this week. And the flavors change. If you don't know this about Crumble, go check it out. Every Sunday night, they announce the new flavors that are going to be there for that week, and they only last that week. And so oftentimes in our home, we've talked about on Friday night or Saturday night, remember they've got this flavor and we still haven't had it yet. So we got to go get cookies on Friday night or Saturday night because come Sunday, they shut the store down just like every good Christian business does, Chick-fil-A, Crumble. They're all blessed by the Lord. And then they work up these new magical recipes and they push them out the next week. And so we kind of live with this little like FOMO on Sunday afternoons like, oh, what's coming out, what's coming out, what's coming out. And the idea is this, is that there's always something more, right? It's like, it doesn't matter if I just had the churro cookie, which is by far the best one they make, just FYI. The churro cookie, it doesn't matter if I've had that one. I want to see what they came up with next week. Doesn't matter that I just got the new iPhone because there's this new one that's about to come out. And there's this kind of this push for more. In fact, the great philosopher from Sesame Street, Cookie Monster, you know, he has a statement that he makes, and he says this. He says, "Me want cookies." You know, and I think if we're honest in our lives, maybe it's not with cookies, but there's something that kind of drives us, like more of something. In fact, some of us, this might happen with vacations. We think of like, last year we did this, but this year we want to do that. This could happen with vehicles. It's like, man, I've been driving this for a while. It's time to upgrade to this. It can happen with phones. It can happen with clothes. Last summer, I was wearing this style of pant, but now I have to get these bigger boot cut. My wife got these bigger kind of bottom leg pants, and I don't know what any of that stuff's called, but she was wearing them the other day. They're really cute. She looks cute in them. And my 8-year-old daughter noticed. And she comes walking in. She's like, ugh. And I was just watching her, and I was like, and my wife was like, what, Willow? And she's like, I don't have any pants like that. And so guess what? This week she got some pants like that, praise the Lord, because her pants from last summer wouldn't work this summer, obviously, right? So some of you, the more could be your clothing, the more it could be technology, the more it could even be things like eating out. Like there's a new restaurant in town, there's a new this in town, which, by the way, they're putting a Dutch Bros on this side of town. You don't have to drive all the way to the west anymore. You know, but whatever it may be, I think most of us, if we were honest, we could look in our lives and we could find maybe a couple places that there's a push for more. That doesn't matter what we currently have. The reality is I would like to have just a little bit more. In fact, if there was one word that maybe describes our society better than any other word, I would think it might be this word, more. That our society, we're kind of just pushing and driving for more and better and smarter ways to do things. And I think Jesus had something to say about this idea, or what I may even say is a heart condition of wanting more. And so let's look at Luke chapter 12. I'm going to look at a conversation that Jesus had, and then he follows it up with a parable to really help us understand. In Luke chapter 12, verse 13 through 21, it says, "Then someone called out from the crowd, 'Teacher,'" this sounds to me, if you have high school kids or middle school kids in your house, this sounds like something some kids would be yelling. "Teacher, Mom, please tell my brother to divide the estate. Please tell my brother to share the pizza with me." Does anyone ever had any kind of like argument? Steve's shaking his head like that in the house. There's only one piece left. We got to split it in half. And like who gets to cut it matters, right? You know, and this is the conversation that's happening right here. "Teacher, please tell my brother that we need to divide my father's estate. He's to share it with me." And Jesus replied to him, "Friend, who made me a judge over you to decide such a thing as that? That's not my responsibility. I'm not supposed to get involved in that." Then Jesus said to him, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed." And I want to pause here because we're going to kind of unpack this today a little bit more. Let's look at what Jesus said, though. He says, it didn't say guard against greed. He says guard against every kind of greed. I think there's different kinds of greed. I think sometimes we think of greed, we just think money. But I think greed actually affects us in a lot of different ways in our life. And he says this life is not measured by how much you own. Then he told him a story. So Jesus goes on to tell a parable. It says, "A rich man had a fertile farm. He had a great farm, and it produced fine crops. And he said to himself, 'What should I do? I don't have room for all of my crops. This harvest is too big.' And so this is what he said. He goes, 'I know, I'll tear down my barns. I'm going to build bigger barns. Then I'll have room enough to store all of the wheat and the other goods. And I'll sit back and I'll say to myself, my friend, you have enough stored away for years to come. Now take it easy. Eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, you will die this very night. Then who will get everything that you've worked for? You filled up those barns. You've been sitting there and enjoying all of this wealth. But when you die, where does it go?' He says, 'Yes, a person is a fool to store up earthly wealth, but not to have a rich relationship with God.'" Look at the contrast that Jesus gives. He says it's a fool to be greedy. It's a fool to build up all this wealth and to store all these things and to be in a constant pursuit of more. Why? Because it comes in contrast with having a healthy relationship with God. Let's pray. God, thank you for your word. I pray today as we look at this idea of more, this idea of greed. God, I pray that you would look in our hearts. And God, I pray that we would open ourselves up to you and we'd allow the word to penetrate and to rightfully divide our heart and help cut away anything that's not right or unholy and help us to be more like you, Jesus. Help us to not let anything that we have in our lives or anything we're in pursuit of to come between us and you. But God, we want to know you better today. And I pray that your word would help us do that. In Jesus' name, the church said, amen. So I think many of us in the room, we're all in the pursuit of more in some form or another. For some of us, it's easy. You could say wealth. You could say money. Others, maybe it's not as easy to see. We have a desire to maybe eat out more or to have more clothes or more furniture. Or even yesterday, I was driving through our neighborhood. Our pools opened up in our neighborhood. We got these little HOA pools, and they had some food trucks out there. And I was driving by, and everyone had their garages open. And I recognized something, and this is a Midwestern thing because this didn't happen in Arkansas. One, we don't open our garages because that's my territory, my kingdom. You stay off my lawn. Two, that's just how people act in Arkansas. And then two, that we don't have basements and cool weather in the spring. It just goes straight from like winter to muggy summer. Lots of humidity, and it's just nasty. So we keep everything shut down. Windows closed, blinds closed, garage doors shut. And every time a door opens, someone in the house yells, "Shut the door! You're letting the heat in." Or my dad would say, "We're not trying to air condition the whole yard." You know, things like that. But in Wichita, man, it's beautiful. People are outside, garages. And this is what I noticed. There's many people in my neighborhood that have bigger TVs in their garage than I've got in my house. Like, what's the deal with the garage TV? Can someone answer this for me? Like, you've already got, in Kansas, you've got an upstairs living room, and everyone has basements, and so you got a downstairs living room, and a lot of people even have TVs in their bedroom. I think the TV in the garage says less about the square footage of the home. And I think maybe it says more about the marriage and the family reactions in the home. When the dad is trying to go to the garage to watch TV or to watch the game, that says something about something else entirely, I think. But nonetheless, there's TVs and technology, and there's different things that people want more of, more equipment for their business, more money to invest in stocks and Bitcoin. And one thing is for true, I think all of us want more. There's a book that came out several years ago by Bob and Rusty Russell, and it's called Money, a User's Manual. And they did a study, and in the early 1900s, like 1900, 1902, 1903, they asked the average person in the United States a couple questions. This is what they found out. The average person in the United States wanted 72 different things on average, 72 different things. But they considered 18 of those essential. Now, in the year 2000, they came back and did the study again. So 100 years later, the average person wanted 500 things, and they considered 100 of those essential. There is a hard trend there. You go from wanting 72 and thinking 18 are essential to wanting 500 and thinking 100 essential. So I think this is what this tells us, is that if we would all be honest in the room today, there is something inside of us in some way or some capacity, a desire for more. And that's showing up in our shopping, our spending, and all these different things. Ecclesiastes talks about this. It's a little bit of a warning for this. It says, whoever loves money never has enough. They want more. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied with their income. Want to make more anyway. Want to make more money. This too is meaningless. So the word greed is kind of what we're talking about here today. It comes from an old English word. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, but it means this: always hungry for more. And so I think sometimes when we think of the word greed, we automatically start to associate it to money, but I want to make sure we can widen this up a little bit. But when you think of greed, there's an old Roman proverb that says this, that greed is like seawater. The more you drink it, the thirstier you get. The more you get of it, the more you want of it. So why are we hungry for more? Why is humanity like driving for more? And last week we talked about the fulfillment. Part of our fulfillment is found in being who God's called us to be and doing what God has created us to do. But I think another part of our fulfillment is understanding who God is and what he should mean to our life, and in that pursuit of knowing him better. And there's this unquenchable appetite in each of us, and I think the problem is not that we want more, but it's that what we're eating or what we're consuming isn't bringing us any satisfaction. That this desire for more is actually, I think, put in there by God. The problem is what we're eating, what we're consuming to try to satisfy it. In fact, I'd say this, that greed always pursues more externally to try to fill the voids that we have internally and even eternally. And so this is the tension point, is that we have an appetite for more, and I think the problem is we're just eating something that's not actually fulfilling. Like we're eating something that's not giving us nutrients. Have you ever had a salad for lunch? An hour later, guess what? You're still hungry. That's right. I might feel healthy, but I'm still hungry, right? And so this is the greed is like eating salads for lunch, all right? When there may be something better out there, actually fulfills us in a deeper capacity, internally and eternally. Genesis, in fact, I can show you that this has been around since the beginning of humanity. In Genesis chapter 3, actually I don't have it there, I'll just read it here from my notes. In Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve are on the earth and they're in the garden, but then the serpent, the snake, Satan, comes to tempt them. In Genesis 3 it says, now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animals that the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, did God really say? So the serpent's questioning Eve. Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Did God say you can't eat from any of them? And this is the deception here. And the woman said to the serpent, no, he didn't say that. We can eat from the trees in the garden, But God did say, you must not eat from the fruit of the tree that's in the middle of the garden. So she says in her own answer, no, God said we can eat from all of them except for one. Well, if you know the story, what ends up happening, Eve and Adam both eat from that one tree. That tells us something about the heart of humanity. It tells us this, that doesn't matter how much we have, it's never enough. They had literally everything. Every food that they can think of, their calling and purpose was fulfilled. God showed them. God created a helper. He created Eve for Adam. God actually walked in the garden with Adam and Eve and had conversations. They had an access to God that we don't have in the same tangible sense. Like they had everything. They were living in utopia. There was no world hunger. There was no wars. There was no sickness. There was no famines. Like they lived in a utopia. Everything was perfect. They had everything that we're trying to achieve. They had it, yet it wasn't enough. So what does that tell us? It tells us that inside the heart of each person is this desire for more. And when it's misplaced, we start to take things that maybe were never meant to be ours to begin with. In fact, I'll say this, that inside of each of us is a strong desire to have what we do not have. That's what greed is. Greed is the desire inside of each of us to have what we don't have. And this is why greed affects everybody, because it doesn't matter who you are in the room, doesn't matter how much money you have in the room. Doesn't matter what you drive in the room, what kind of vacations you're going on. Doesn't matter what your house is like. It doesn't matter like what your 401k looks like. Here's the reality. It doesn't matter where you're at in the room. All of us have something, but all of us could have more. And if we're not careful, we end up thinking and being consumed about that pursuit of how do I get to that next level? How do I get to more? When we think of greed, the immediate picture that comes to my mind is Scrooge McDuck. I don't know if you guys have ever watched any Disney. Scrooge McDuck, okay? He's like Daffy Duck, or not Daffy Duck, Donald Duck. Yeah, Daffy Duck is Looney Tunes. We've been watching that. It's all confusing. Donald Duck's uncle, right? And Scrooge McDuck is really wealthy businessman. He has the monocle. And the thing that he's known for, if you've ever watched any of the old school Disney cartoons, is he's got a room full of money that he swims in. Like he jumps off the diving board and gets in there and swims all around. Like he's so consumed. He's much like this guy in the story. So consumed with getting more, I'm going to build a bigger room so I can hold more. And so I think oftentimes when we think of greed, that's the picture we get, is people who are trying to amass mass amounts of wealth. But I think if we're not careful and we don't look at this story from the perspective of Genesis, we realize it's not just a rich people problem. And in fact, I would say this, that greed is not a rich people problem, it's a sinful people problem. And we think of guys like Scrooge, like people who are rich are the ones who struggle with it, but the reality is, all of us struggle with it because we're all sinful people. Like there's some level of something that maybe we want in an unhealthy way, or maybe we have or we're pursuing it in an unhealthy way that would maybe place it into a place that would not be Christ-like. And so how do you identify greed in your life? You're like, John, I'm not like a wealthy person, so I always think of greed as being a wealth thing. I want to show you. Here's a really simple exercise. It's on your notes if you got the note sheet today. How to identify greed in your life? You just fill in these two blanks. If I have more blank, then I'll fill more blank. Here's a couple examples. If I have more money, then I'll feel more secure. Another example, if I had more books, I would feel smarter. And that's not necessarily true. I got a lot of books and I don't feel very smart. If I have more time with friends, then I will feel more important and more connected. If I have more pain or more power and control, then I'll be more respected by my peers. If I can upgrade my vehicle, then when I pull up to the parking lot, I'll feel more accepted by those I work with. If I go on this vacation, then we'll get the rest that we need. And see, the reality is, greed isn't just a money thing. Greed goes beyond resources. It goes beyond money. It goes to anything that we want that we don't have that's not rightfully ours. I could want a relationship. I could want a friendship. The word greed is similar to the word covet, similar to the word envy, which is to want something that you do not have. And you believing that if you get that thing, that's going to bring that fulfillment. And so I want to kind of break this down for you 3 different ways I think that greed can look, because it doesn't just look like money. I think it doesn't look like a lot of money. I think it can look like 3 different things. I want to show you these. Greed first can look like scarcity. Greed can look like scarcity. What does this mean? It means you live in a mindset of I don't have enough. The mindset can come from a broken past, or I would say this mindset can come from a broke past. Maybe you grew up without some things. Maybe there's some things in your life that you needed at different points that your parents or grandparents or foster parents, the people in your life weren't able to provide for you. And maybe you went without for quite a bit, like literal things that you needed that you did not have. And this belief is founded in the idea that there's a limited amount of resources, and if someone else has something, that means there might not be enough for me. That's what scarcity mentality does. If you have it, then that means there's only so many of these out there. That means I might not be able to have it as well. And this is really built on insecurity, and insecurity is a powerful force behind greed. Like insecurity, it's what if I don't have enough later, so I got to stock up more today. Maybe you've done this before. I've done this. I grew up in a large family, 6 kids. I'm the oldest of 6, 4 brothers and 1 younger sister. And growing up, we had 3 foster brothers and sister that lived with us. And then also my aunt and her 2 kids lived with us. So at one point, we had like 19 people in our home. It was crazy. Thanksgiving rolls around. There's no such thing as seconds, okay, in my house. It's not that we didn't have enough food. It's just that there's that many people, and by the time you get back to the front of the line, someone else has already gone through twice. It's just how it worked. And so this is how I figured it out, is if I wanted seconds in macaroni and cheese, I better get my seconds at the first, right? And so what do? You get 2 plates. I became a 2-plate guy at Thanksgiving. Like I got my macaroni and cheese and my mashed potato and my deviled eggs, because those are the things I love, and I'm scared that if I don't get enough at the front side, there might not be enough left over. So I'll pile that one high, and then the other one's turkey and dressing and all that stuff. And so that was my thing, is like, I had better get it now. And then you sit down and you can't finish it all, and grandma comes up behind you, and what does she say? You guys have all heard the statement. Your mama said it to you, your grandma said it to you, your dad has said it to you. Your eyes were bigger than your stomach. That whole concept of making something more comes from this idea of like scarcity. That's a very simple illustration of it, but the idea is the same, is that I better fill up this plate now, because what if there's not more later? And so that turns into a form of greed. Now I've got more on the plate than what I can eat, and I end up maybe even wasting something because I was scared I wouldn't have it later. And scarcity does that, and we do this from time to time, and it comes from a deep-seated root of absence. And this is a statement I would make with this, is that what I do not have is what drives my greed when it comes to scarcity. What I do not have is what drives it. What am I missing? Second thing, when it comes to greed, I think greed can look like status. This is me trying to fit in. The mindset has more to do with how you see yourself than really how the rest of the world even sees you. It has to do with how you see yourself when you show up to other places, when you're with your friend groups, when you're at work, when you're with your family. Are you representing the person that you wished you were? In fact, when we take a spiritual gifts test and a disc test in our Start Here experience, we tell them always, when you're taking these tests about yourself, write down the first answer that comes to mind, because the more you think about it, the more you start answering it to the person you wished you were versus the person you actually are. And then the test isn't very accurate because you're thinking too hard, and you're like, well, I hope people see me like this, so I'm going to circle that. And this is really what this kind of looks like. It's that I'm worried about my appearance. I'm worried about how people see me. I remember the first time in my life where I ever really recognized this, because you don't really, as a kid, when you're 5 years old, 6 years old, I've got a 4-year-old son. He has no idea who has what, when, where, or why. The only thing he's concerned with is what he has, but he's not comparing it to anyone else. He's just kind of happy-go-lucky. But I remember when I was in 3rd grade, I go to school, and it was Christmas break. We all come back, and of course, when we come back from Christmas break, it's like, what do I got? What do I got? What do I got? What'd you get? What'd you get for Christmas? And my friend Joey, he rolls up with these gray suede Nike tennis shoes with a navy blue little Nike swoosh mark. They were sweet. Low tops, Air Maxes. They were super cool. I was like, Joey, those are sweet shoes. Like, I got these for Christmas. Then my buddy Michael walks in, and Michael's family, they own a construction company, and they did custom homes. So Michael walks in with some Air Jordans, black, red, and white, brand new. They were awesome. If he still had them today, it would probably be worth a lot of money. But these things were awesome. Then my buddy Josh rolls in, and he was kind of a Michael Jordan, but he liked the Tar Heel. So he has this like kind of teal or whatever not teal, baby blue colored Jordans on and Nike Air Maxes on. And he rolls in, and then I start to look around. I realize all my friends are wearing Nikes, and I'm still here representing BK Knights. Anyone remember the BK Knights? It was like the Walmart, Kmart knockoff of all the Nikes. It's like, yeah, they were kind of cool, and when you stomped on them, they lit up, which is cool until you come back from third grade Christmas break. And all of a sudden, it wasn't cool. I recognized I didn't have the same things that everyone else had. I recognized that was part of a status. Like, they walked in with Nikes, and I didn't have Nike. In fact, you probably can think of a moment in your life where you didn't feel like you had the same things, and that maybe put you in a different group than other people. And this affects us, affects our appearance. And in fact, they did a study on this about the Starbucks, the red cup, the red cup that comes out at the holidays. And that people, they do like the holiday drinks, but they're actually more favorable towards the fall flavors than they are the winter flavors. But people are more consumed with carrying the red cup during the winter. And so their sales go up because of the cup, not because what's in it. Because people want to be seen holding the red cup at Starbucks, like, oh, you got the holiday drink. There's not a fall cup. No one cares about that, even though their fall flavors, I think, are better. But what's the deal? Is Starbucks coffee so good that it's worth spending $7 on? Or is it more about the status of holding the cup? The status of I can afford to get a drink. And I think appearances, this hits us in so many practical ways. It's not just cars and houses and expensive things, trips. It can be in little things like where we spend our money getting coffee. It can be little things like what we do with our time. It can be little things like the furniture that's in our house or the clothes that we wear or even the clothes that our kids are wearing. And the list goes on and on and on. And so here's a statement that kind of sums this up. How I look to others is what drives my greed in this area. How I look to others. I'm concerned about how they see me, and this is what drives my greed in this area. And then the last one for us today, I think that greed can look like just straight up selfishness. And this one is probably the more obvious one to acknowledge. This mindset's about the actual pursuit of just more. Doesn't even matter what the number is. It doesn't matter what the stuff is, what the position is. The reality is, it doesn't matter what I have. It's never going to be enough. And once I get to that next level, the level just changed. Once I win that, if you ever watch the Last Chance documentary with Michael Jordan, you get a sense of this kind of greed. It had nothing to do, at some point, it had nothing to do with the money, had nothing to do with the shoe deals, had nothing to do with the championship. He just had to do one more. In fact, if you watch that documentary, he still has an edge. Like he's still angry a little bit, like he hasn't won enough, like people don't respect him enough. They asked him about him and Isaiah Thomas because they used to get at it together with the Detroit Pistons. Him and Isaiah did not like each other. And they asked Isaiah hey, what do you think of Michael? Do you like Michael Jordan now? What's your thoughts? He's like, we don't really talk, but I respect him, man. The dude accomplished so much. He's been incredible for the sport. And so you see this Isaiah kind of referencing the past. We didn't get along, but he's done a lot. Pretty cool, kind of a mad respect. You ask Michael, and he's like, I still hate that dude. If I saw him right now, I'd dunk on his face. I do not. Well, what's the difference? There's just this desire for more that just is unquenchable. It doesn't matter what he's achieved, how much money he has, where he's gone, what movies are attached to him, what status is attached to him. There's just gotta be more. And this is that kind of the greed that Jesus was speaking to in Luke 12. This unquenchable greed. You build a barn to put all your stuff in, but then you gain more stuff. So what do? Tear down that barn and build a bigger barn. And this is all about acquisition. And this form of greed gives us a sense of power and control. And this sense of greed, and this spirit of greed is a very dangerous one because it oftentimes hurts people along the way. Because it's all about what I can have control over, what I can gain. And a statement I would make about this one is having more is what drives my greed. It doesn't even matter what it is. You could put anything in this blank. It's just more blank. Having more this, having a better car, having a nicer house, getting another raise, getting a title upgrade in my business. Colossians 3 says this. It says, so put to death the sinful earthly things lurking within you, having nothing to do, and this is the easy list here, sexual immorality, impurity, lust, and evil desires. Okay, those things sound bad. But then Paul goes on to say this, don't be greedy, for a greedy person is an idolater, someone who worships the things of this world. Someone who has elevated stuff, accomplishment, more over God. He says this is the tension point for greed. And I think this is the tension point for us as well, is because when we start talking about greed, what we're really talking about is worship. And when we're talking about worship, what we're really talking about now is competition with Jesus. Because Jesus says you can't serve both two masters. You can't serve money and God. And then Jesus goes on to say this. He says, where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so this conversation about greed, and I think the reason Jesus swings so hard at this topic is, and he does multiple times to the Gospels, is not because he's actually concerned about money, because he's concerned about your heart. He's concerned about what you're worshiping, what you're pursuing, what you're elevating, what you're looking to for your worth, what you're looking to for your security, what you're looking to for your value in your life. Is it more this, or to fit in this, or to look like this? Or do you really find yourselves consumed with the glory and the beauty and the majesty of Christ? This is the problem all the way back with Adam and Eve. Eve had all of that, yet she was consumed with what she didn't have. And that's the heart of greed. It doesn't even matter what that next thing is. It's just the heart of being consumed with what you don't have. But I think when we're able to find ourselves as being complacent with what we do have, content with what we do have, God, what you've given me, this is enough because I just want to know you better. God, in fact, what you've given me, what can I do to use this to benefit you, because I want to know you better. And in fact, I think the greatest way that we break off greed is through generosity. If what I'm holding on to is keeping me from Christ, then maybe I need to let go of it. If what I'm gaining is keeping me or becoming a God between me and Christ, maybe I need to let go of it. And I want to share one more story, just in closing with you. It's from Matthew chapter 19. Jesus, again, is in the audience, and someone calls out to him. And behold, a man came up to him and said, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" What's the one thing I got to do? That's what he asked. What are you looking for? What do you need from me so I can go on to heaven? And Jesus said, "Why do you ask me about what is good? There's only one who is good. If you would enter life, keep the commandments. Do the commandments," what Jesus tells him. He said to him, look at the questions this guy's asking. Which ones? Like, I know there's a bunch of them. So which ones are the important ones? And so he's asking a question, what do I have to do? What's the exchange rate of me doing something so I can get something from you? And Jesus said, "You shall not murder." Okay, if we just did a list here, we all start by raising our hands. How many of you would say, "I've not done that"? Come on now, we can vote on this. Hopefully everyone across the room. If someone didn't raise their hands, you know who not to sit by next week. So, I mean, Jesus starts off real easy. The guy's like, "Yeah, I haven't done that. I won't ask any more after this," because we might start getting into some of these. He says, "You shall not commit adultery." Didn't do that. "You shall not steal." Haven't stolen. "You shall not bear false witness." Haven't done that. "Honor your father and mother." Oh, I do that all the time. "You shall love your neighbor and love yourself." I just mowed my neighbor's grass yesterday. They didn't even ask me. I just had my mower. I just mowed it for him. And so he's like, "Can I get in? I've done all these." And the young man said to him, "All these I've kept. What do I still lack?" What's the one thing? What do I lack? And Jesus said to him, "If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. You know, I read this, every time I've read this and studied this scripture and heard it taught, I've always thought about it from the perspective of, well, there's this greedy young ruler, and Jesus wants them to give all his stuff away and then just follow him. But I've missed a couple pieces in this. When you slow it down and read it, I wanted to show you this. Jesus asked him, let's look at what he asked. if you would be perfect, go and sell what you possess and give it to the poor. So he did ask him, sell it all, give it to the poor. But it was not sell it all, give it to the poor, and then that's it. What does Jesus say after that? And you will have treasures in heaven. Like, you do this, there's a blessing that's coming your way. You do this, like, I've got you. I'm not asking you to just be generous and then just float away and disappear. No, I'm saying if you're generous, heaven is going to notice. My Father up in heaven is going to notice. We're going to mark that down and recognize your generosity. And then he goes on to say this. He says, then come follow me. But it says, when the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. You see, he thought he had great possessions. But what really had happened is the possessions had him. And Jesus was saying, if you would recognize what has a hold of your heart, if you would break free from what's holding you, if you would recognize this greed that's in your life, you think these are your things, but I'm the Father of heaven. I've created everything. These are my things. And if you would be willing to release them, one, I got you. You'll have treasure in heaven. Two, you'll realize that those are not your things if you release them. The problem is, I think for a lot of people, is that greed has a hold of us. We think we've got it under control because we're making money, because we're working, because we're doing this and we're investing and we're buying that and I saved up for this, when the reality is those things own us. And I think to break free from greed, we're going to have to let go of what's holding us. We have to let go of what's holding us. God is less concerned what's in our hands, but often what's in our hands is what's holding on to our heart. And that's why he speaks about money. That's why I'm talking about money today. That's why we're talking about greed today, is not because we need money. The church is blessed. You guys are super generous. Many of you give very generously. But what I'm talking about is what's keeping you from knowing Jesus better. Jesus says, come in. The invitation, he gave this man the same invitation he gave the disciples. But this man, unlike Peter, chose his possessions over his Savior. Peter, when he was called upon, he pulled his boat up to the shore and said, someone tie this up, I'm out of here. I'm going to follow this man. I want to know this man. And the irony is, if you keep reading this story, the disciples say, well, what good is it? Jesus says it's almost impossible for a rich man to get in heaven. And Peter asked him, Peter goes, well, what about us? Can we get into heaven? We've valued possessions over you sometimes. We've been greedy in different moments, in different ways. What about us? And Jesus goes, you 12 right here, you got treasures in heaven no man can count, because of what you've been willing to give. So generosity, it breaks our heart from this greed. I was talking about Peru at the beginning of a message, and I want to close just with this. A couple years ago when I went to Peru, I came back, and I didn't realize it, but I didn't give all of my soles back to the interpreter so he can exchange them back to U.S. dollars or just give them to someone so they could do something with it. I came home with about $40 or $50 worth of Peruvian dollars, Peruvian coins and stuff. And I got home and I set them on the counter, and one of my sons, I think Jaden, I think he might be the one that got it. Yeah, Jaden. He came and was like, Dad, can I have this? And I'm like, sure. And he's like, how much is it worth? I was like, nothing. It's not worth anything. He's like, what do you mean it's not worth anything? He's like, it's Peruvian money. I was like, I can't take it to go get a haircut here. Caleb, my barber, he won't take my Peruvian dollars, my soles. He won't take them. I can't take it to take my wife out on a date. I can't take it and go buy clothes for my kids for back to school. The dollars are not useful here. And the reality is they are useful, but they just have a kingdom at which their use is limited. And I think for us to really understand the heart of God and money, this is what we need to understand, is that there is a kingdom that our dollars are useful. We can't take them with us to heaven, and when we try to take them out of this place, they don't do us any good. It's what Jesus told the man in Luke chapter 12. It won't go with you when you go. But there's a kingdom at which it is useful, at which God can use it, at which God can see it to advance his mission and his ways, and can see it to invest in the people and care for people and feed people, and that's here right now. Those Peruvian dollars can't pay for a haircut in the States, but if I get back to Peru, they might be functional. Our dollars here in heaven won't have a function, but if we're willing to be generous with them now, this is what the Heavenly Father says, I got you in heaven. And if we want to be people who break the shackles of greed off, I think we just got to, the antidote is generosity.